A very warm welcome to another episode of Fauza's Diary. If you are looking for something little and yet inspiring, then you have stumbled upon the right show. That's the beauty about my diaries. They inspire us, they encourage us, but also they make us think. I love the men and women who join me on my diaries because these are men and women who are living the talk. They have all gained different experiences based on their walks of life, and often they are willing and keen to share about their journey. And today on this conversation, I'm so humbled to have a sister friend, Sadika Kebbi, all the way from actually Lebanon, but now she calls United Arab Emirates Dubai her second home. And she's joining me to share a very, very, very inspiring story that I feel you should join us on this journey because this is a story that has well lived. Sadika, thank you so much for saying yes to have this conversation with me. I'm so humbled and I'm so thrilled that we are actually here today. And I'd love for you to take a minute or so to actually introduce yourself because I always feel that when you do that, it brings more connection with the viewers who are watching us. Sadika.
Thank you so much, first of all, Fauza, for having me on your diary program. I'm the humbled one, and I'm so honored to share some of my journey with you and with your audience. Well, I can say that I'm from a country that once was called the Paris of the Middle East, and that is Lebanon, as you mentioned. And I always say that my first title, if you want, I'm a human being in the making, because I believe that my purpose in life is to develop into the human being God created and not society created. Mm-hmm. So this is my journey. This is my purpose. I'm also a John Maxwell certified trainer, coach, and speaker and teacher. And I try to make personal growth my priority, just because to help other people develop into the human God created, because some people really need a hand to help them get out of the mud pit they sometimes find themselves in. So this is me in brief.
That's so beautiful.
Thank you, dear.
I love what you say that, you know, you love to tap or to lend a shoulder in other people. But I always believe, Sadika, there is always a reason why we all do these things that we do. You know, everybody has been called for a greater purpose here on earth, and your purpose, you know, is helping others. So could you please maybe share a little bit what led you actually to devote your time, you know, in helping those who they need a helping hand? Especially, I want us to talk a bit about, you know, the women and young boys that you sort of serve, you know, in Lebanon. Maybe we can go back a little bit there because that's where it all started, isn't it, Sadika?
Yes, dear. Would like to take you back to my childhood. And there was this person who saved me from my mud pit, because I experienced a trauma at a very early age. I was around 10 years old during the civil war in Lebanon, just the beginning of the civil war, when I experienced a very tough event. And unfortunately, at the time when you are such a child, you fall into the trap of grudges and hate and anger towards the other. So on what we call in Lebanon Black Saturday, it was on the 6th of December in 1975, when I can call her my soulmate, Jana. She was my neighbor, she was my classmate, she was my play friend. You can call her all names you can think of. Unfortunately, on that day, she left her home with her family at a very early time, heading to their village, unknowing that there were barriers and barricades around the city, which were set by, unfortunately, a Christian party. And according to the ID, they slaughtered people. So their ID stated that they were Muslims, and the whole family was obliterated on that day. So this was a very tough situation to experience. And unfortunately, I saw Jana when they brought her back home. And, you know, the curiosity of a child that pushes you to understand sometimes things or what is happening. You go sometimes beyond the borders or the limits your parents set or the people around you set. And I dared uncover her, and it was a great shock to see her slaughtered neck. And on that day, my Lebanon shattered, and my faith in the country and the people just was unbelievingly destroyed. But I guess I am one of the lucky ones because God saved my soul, and 2 years later, he sent us to that priest known to us as Uncle George, because he's my father's childhood friend. And our neighborhood was heavily bombarded, and my dad decided that we need to seek a shelter, and it was Uncle George's place. So he took us in. And the minute I walked in, I remember, because I'm the eldest and my brother is like 8 years younger than I am. So he addressed me and he said, like, Sadika, whenever you are addressed in this neighborhood or anybody asks about your name, your parents or something, from now on, your name is Mary, your brother's is Joseph, your father's is Eli, and your mother's is Anna. So don't you ever forget this. And in fact, in the evening, Uncle George's door was banged on violently, and he immediately rushed to my side and he gives me his Bible, his personal Bible. And he says, no matter what, keep that Bible against your heart, it will save you. And don't look at the door. But also the child, I always was a curious person. I took a peek and there were 10 armed masked men standing on Uncle George's doorstep. And they just bluntly say, we know that you are hiding a Muslim family, you better hand them in. And he says, this is my brother who came visiting from the States. If you would like to come in and meet him and his family, it will be an honor for me. So they just left. And in that moment, my world tumbled again. And I was like, what's happening? 2 years ago, a Christian took the life of my best friend. And now 2 years later, a Christian is saving our lives. So the first lesson was never ever generalize. People are not the same, no matter where they come from. So this was a huge lesson. And Uncle George was that person who showed the way and led the way. He never preached. I remember the second day, he wakes me up very early in the morning for my morning prayer. And he was the one who taught me actually how to pray according to Islam. And I was standing, I remember, for 7 months, for 5 times a day, I would stand on my prayer rug and Uncle George would sit next to me with his Bible and his rosary. And we prayed together to the same creator, I mean. And after each prayer, imagine, for 5 times a day, for 7 months in a row, he would repeat, my little Sadika, my sweet Mary, when you hold God in your heart, the human he created reveals itself by serving others. And then And only then, even your enemy becomes human. And this was at a very early age, and I was mentored, I guess, by a savior who was sent to me, of course, by God. And this is why I say that my purpose is to develop into that human God created.
Mm.
And most of us get, I mean, they get imprisoned in that box. Society
Yeah.
loves them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working on that, and it's a long process. It's not an easy one.
Mm-mm. No, we are all a work in progress. As I always say, we are all a work in progress, Sadika. But I think listening from this side, you know, hearing your story, two different worlds collided together. And at such a tender age, you know, you saw a loved one being killed, a very painful death, and then by Christians, and then a Christian takes you in his own house and teaches you how to, you know, how to live. I love what you say that Uncle George said, you know, when we all love God and the people that he has created, and even our enemies, they, you know, they become our friends. You know, you said something
Yeah,
like that.
I'm human.
And it takes a lot of faith to believe that, because anywhere there is pain, there is, anywhere there is pain and anger, you know, and confusion and all this, there is always a lot of questions that they go through. And there was Uncle George giving you his own Bible, teaching you how to pray, you know, and he saved your life by not giving you away to, you know, to these people. How has this helped you in seeing human beings the way God sees them? That's my question number one, Sadika. And then secondly, there was trauma after all this. Of course, we pray. We have faith in God. But there are some things that we always need to deal with ourselves. God helps us to heal, but we also have to do some healing work ourselves, because otherwise, you know, you will always be in and out. So how have you dealt with the healing process after the trauma? If you could also share a bit about that.
Yes, of course. Well, let me tell you about the answer the first question. It is also Uncle George. As I mentioned, he showed the way and led the way. So whenever there was a peace treaty, and of course we didn't have schools at the time, he would take me along with him to serve others. And he never asked where these people came from or what their religion was or what their color was. So at the time of war, everything was scarce, water, bread, all this. So we would stand in long lines to get a ration of bread, you know, and it's pita bread. So it's a bag with like 7 pieces. And we would go before going back home and taking the whole thing for us, because a family was allowed for one.
Only one packet?
For one packet, yes. So what we did with the one packet, or Uncle George actually showed me what to do with the one packet. We would go to the people who couldn't leave their houses, like the elderly, like the orphans, like people who were in need, and we would give 6 pita bread away, and we would keep only one. Even water didn't reach the houses at the time. There was a place where you could fill in your bottles and take back home. So also we helped the people who couldn't get there and stand in lines for hours and hours to get the water. So he showed me the way, and he kind of planted the seed. Or actually, let me tell you something. I believe that we are all seeds that God created. And what is inside the seed is inborn. It's already there. We have it. But unfortunately, I go back, it's society that distorts that, and it hides your true gifts, the gifts given to God by you, okay? It hides them and you cannot see them anymore. You become blind. So sometimes you discover them on your own, but sometimes it's some other people who just water that seed and allow it to blossom and grow. And I had my mentor, Uncle George again. So this is the first part of your question. As for the second one, because of what Uncle George showed me, at the age of 14, I joined the Red Cross in Lebanon, the International Red Cross. And I started helping as much as possible. And this was the beginning of my healing, because during that service at the Red Cross, I saw the 18 sects. We are 18 sects in Lebanon. I saw the 18 sects doing crimes, killing each other. And then I understood that it wasn't only the Christian and the Muslim, it wasn't only the Druze and the Shia, it wasn't only the Sunni and the Alawite, for example. It was everybody doing this massacre to everybody and doing this harm to everybody. And then I understood that it is true that I was young, but because of what we went through, you understand that this is politics. Yeah. It's not the human being that is doing this to the other human being. And then you can understand your enemy, as Uncle George said. This person has been influenced by something. This person went through another trauma, and they, unfortunately, politicians, they look for your weaknesses, and this is how they trigger anger and hate. And we say that the devil goes into the details. And this is exactly what they do. They go into the details. And as you mentioned at the beginning, before we started our recording, I mean, we look at the differences, which are minor, in my opinion. They are like maybe 1% max. Yeah. And we look at our similarities. And politicians and politics, they really take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So this was my first step towards healing. When I saw everybody killing everybody, it was like, Sadika, wake up.
Yeah.
Okay. And slowly, slowly along the journey and by serving others, it added to my healing.
Yeah. I think there is so much power when you give. You give not because you have, but you give because in the process of giving to others, you're giving to yourself as well.
And you're growing and you're understanding. I mean, the most important thing is to understand. I have a rule, which is UFST. And it's okay, and it is understand. Okay. First understand before you judge.
Yeah. Yeah. So your healing came upon, I know it's also through the service, you know, your relationship with God and your relationship with Uncle George, you know, you going into Red Cross and start serving others. And for some people, they would hear you speak and say, yeah, but it's easier said than done. Let's talk a bit about forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because for you to be able to heal, you also had to do some forgiving work, right?
Right.
What would you say about that? Okay.
Yeah. Fauza, let me tell you something very important. Maybe I missed it, but ever since I learned never ever to hear to media or listen to media or judge people just by hearing what others are saying. So the first thing I used to do is to go on the ground and check for myself. And this is important, very important. They would say, like, don't go to that area because in that area you will disappear because you are XYZ. So I used to go to that area and check it out for myself, and I would discover something totally different from what the people or the media would project. And this is very important. And I've taught this to my kids, first of all, and then to my students, participants, whatever you can call them. Never, ever take things for granted, just on oral transmission, even in religion. Okay, when I would hear somebody, maybe an imam or a sheikh, say that Islam says that and that, I would take the book simply to check out. I mean, I cannot trust oral transmission because it's done years after years after years, and the truth would be distorted.
Absolutely.
The truth for people. If you want to seek that truth, you have to go and check for yourself and do not rely on anything else. And I know that for a fact, especially Lebanon. I mean, or let's take another example about terrorism. They would tell you Islam is a terrorist religion. Did you read about it? Did you check other people? So it's also, you cannot generalize like I did when I was that young. You need to check out things for yourself before making a certain judgment. So this is very, very important if you really want to see the truth in the face, or face your fears as well, because this creates, I mean, to get over your trauma, you have to get over your fears.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a very nice statement, Sadika, to make. And I want us to go on a little bit here because you have had your own journey, and now here you are. You know, you joined John Maxwell. You did all his training, all his certifications, and all that. And now, you know, you are a coach, you're a trainer, you know, you're doing all these things. I want us to talk a bit about the men and women that you have been carrying, because you have been helping others, you know, especially when things changed, COVID came, right? How has now the coaching been in this couple of years, especially looking at now COVID is there, because the situation in Lebanon, it's improving, but there is still so much to do, you know, and the younger ones you are supporting, and even the women. How has it been, Sadika?
It has been tough. It's not easy at all, especially when you want to venture into those areas where, you know, it's taboo to go there, or it's dangerous to go there, or don't you ever dare going there, you won't come back, you know. So you really have to cross all these barriers. And as you said, I didn't talk about forgiveness a bit a while ago, but once you carry God in your heart and you really hold God in your heart and you walk into the room with God in your heart, it's easily done, you know. It's very easily done. So you walk in as if you were a blank page again, and you want to fill it again according to what you see, what you feel, and the interaction that happens between you and the other people. So I focused especially on the underprivileged areas in Lebanon, because they really need help. And the government doesn't offer that much help to those people. So most of them are illiterate, most of them have no awareness about anything. And poverty, my God, poverty and survival can lead you to do anything, just anything. I mean, you can sell your kids just to survive to that extent. So I wanted to be there and make that difference or be the difference for them and add some value. At least I know one person can't do much, but at some point in 2016, I founded my NGO in Lebanon called Kun Ensan, or Be Human, and it carries the philosophy of Uncle George, of course. So I had a small group of volunteers and a small team, and we started, creating a few workshops and creating a few trainings that can add value to these people, especially when it came to women empowerment and youth empowerment. And I really focused on storytelling, by the way. And it took us years. It didn't happen overnight for people to open up and share. It really took us years. With some families we had to visit on a weekly basis just to help them gain trust and open up. And we started doing stuff through storytelling, and I gave them some skills and techniques just to find the personal story. And I was the one who started. I would share my weaknesses and I would share my pain for them to help, because there's no one that didn't experience pain or suffering in a certain way. Of course, it's relative depending on the person, but once you open up, the other one opens up very easily. And this was, by the way, life-changing and transformative to a greatest extent. If you allow me, I can share the example of one teenager. This happened 3 years ago, just before COVID. And it was the beginning of the revolution in Lebanon. And we had kind of tents in the squares of Lebanon all over the place, where all university professors, teachers, coaches, trainers, whomever you want to think of that had knowledge came to those tents just to raise awareness, and especially with the youth. So at some point, I shared the 15 laws of growth, personal growth for John Maxwell, with a group of youth. And we would meet every day in the square to have kind of a discussion about the 15 laws and the added value when you put your personal growth as a priority and you invest in yourself, and how things can change. So there used to be this 19-year-old who would come listen from afar, and after like 15, 20 minutes, she would leave without saying anything or participating in anything.
Yeah.
And one day she comes up to me on the side and she says, I need help and I want to grow. I want to change what I'm living right now.
Yeah.
And she pinpoints to a place, Fauza, and she tells me, see that place over there? This is a brothel, which is run by my mother. And my sister and I were born there. And this is what we know since day one. But after listening to you, I feel that I don't want this life and I want to change. I want to be someone different. And but my problem is that we are allowed half an hour per day to leave the brothel, and we have to be back. It's the business and it's the mother who puts the rules. So how can you help me?
Yeah.
I didn't hesitate for 1 second. I told her, I will come to you.
Oh.
She said, are you sure? I just want to remind you, you'll be walking into a brothel. I told her, I have no problem whatsoever as long as I'm holding God in my heart. Yeah. And she was, wait a second. Do you know that you have to pay per hour to go into my bedroom? And I was like, I will pay and I'll come to you and we will try to find a way to help you. And we started by just studying Arabic because she was illiterate. So I started by giving her the reading skills and the writing skills.
Mm.
And I mean, she needed to be equipped if she wanted to leave that place. And in her condition, she couldn't leave before having at least a minimal knowledge of writing, reading, and some awareness about what was going on around, and awareness about herself and discovering herself. So I'm so happy I did this, and I did it for almost 2 years. And we still connect through Zoom or phone call or anything. She didn't make it yet. She didn't leave yet, but she's getting ready. And one of those days she will.
Yes.
When it's the right time.
Yeah. You've planted the seeds, you know. You actually haven't planted. The seeds of greatness are already in this girl. You are watering them. You are putting fertilizer in them, Sadika. And at the right time, God will really, uproot her from there. But I think what you are doing, it's something so bravely that looking at the obstacles as others would see, you don't see them as obstacles. You see them as a nice challenge for you to venture out so that you can be of service to others. And I love that, because that's what Martin Luther King actually said. You know, in one of his quotes, Martin Luther King said, you know, service brings significance, and all what we all need is just actually a heart of love, and our time, of course. But I love what you also said, Sadika, that if you put God first, you put God first, He will lead you, protect you, guide you, and all this. I'm such a believer on that as well. And I think it's so beautiful that you didn't see the restrictions. You still remembered what Uncle George said. Hold your Bible, Sadika, and put God first, and He will be there for you. He will protect you. That is so beautiful. We're going to take a commercial break, as I call it, and then we will be right back to carry on with this conversation, because I still feel there is just so much that we can have a chat about, Sadika, that could be of inspiration to another person, could be helping others, to start watering their own seeds and putting fertilizer instead of just looking on what they don't have, rather than looking on what they already have and what can they do with what they have. So stay back, and don't go anywhere. We will be right back with part 2 of this conversation with a sister friend, Sadika Kebbi. She has shared authentically about her journey of how she has really, really listened to what God has in her. It has already been there, and now she's living it. Stay with us.